Number 9, LSU. Number 4, Clemson. Clemson's a 3.5-point favorite. The over-under I have is 243 LSU rushing yards. It's high. It's high. That is what Clemson allowed on average in its 3 SEC losses last year. I have heard so many people throughout this offseason go, well, Clemson has the fewest questions. And I think that is based on Cade Klubnik returning as a preseason All-American at the game's most important position, plus a receiver room that looks like the ones that Clemson had in the 2010s, a defense that just went out and got Tom Allen as arguably the best defensive coordinator in America, a defensive line that's headlined by preseason All-Americans, future first-round guys, number 1 in the country, percentage of returning production. All those things make you think Clemson doesn't have any questions. But on Sunday, in a column for SDS, early thoughts, one early thought on each SEC game, I posed the simple question, hey, are we sure that Clemson can stop the run? After all, Clemson allowed an average of 250 rushing yards in the final 4 games last year, including 288 to the Citadel. That group was 85th in rushing yards per game allowed and 99th in rushing yards per carry allowed, which was almost a full yard per carry worse against FBS teams that finish with a winning record. So in this column, I posed the question, are we sure that Clemson can stop the run? Well, let's just say a little birdie told me that Dabo Swinney screenshotted that and is using that as ammo for his team. Again,
and not to say LSU can run the football, Connor. That's what I'm trying to figure out. I don't know why we need to motivate Clemson to stop LSU, who couldn't run the football to save their lives last year.
True. Very, very true. Both things are true. Okay. And I posed this question by using facts. And I've been told by one Dabo Swinney to tune in on Saturday night. So food for thought. And I can promise you I will be. I will be watching LSU and Clemson. I will be very eager to see if Clemson can stop the run or if I will have to clap back and say, well, I think I was right to ask that question. What does that tell me? For starters, Dabo knows his team is good. Okay? Darn good. He is having to look far and wide the week of his game to play all the angles. Because last I checked, Dabo would rather be spinning the narrative that it's little old Clemson instead of a group that's being picked by a lot of people to win a national championship. That's the territory that Clemson is in now in 2025 that is so different than the previous few years. For what it's worth, probably not going to see LSU run for 243 yards. Okay. I get that. I haven't done that since the 2023 Florida game where Jade Daniels got every blade of grass that he wanted that night.
What a beautiful day.
LSU's run game has been a massive issue in these season openers, Will. I knew it was bad. I didn't realize it was this bad. 113 rushing yards in 2024, 113 in 23, 139 in 22, 48 rushing yards in that UCLA disaster in 21, and then 80 rushing yards in that 2020 game against Mississippi State where KJ Costello is still throwing for yards. Bad. The pass defense, even worse. Go look up those numbers. They're not particularly inspiring either. Don't tell Dabo about the things working against LSU. But I do think so many people have overlooked the things that are working against Clemson. If Death Valley Jr., according to Brian Kelly, if that Death Valley is the place where dreams go to die, tell me why Clemson only has 2 home wins against AP top 25 finishers in the last 4 seasons, and both of them were against Sam Hartman. Different Sam Hartman teams, one Wake Forest, one Notre Dame. Brian Kelly doesn't have the rings. Dabo's got the rings. So I understand why some will tell you that one wins big games and one does not win big games. Okay, I get that. In matchups against top 10 teams at the time of the matchup, since Brian Kelly arrived at LSU, Dabo has 2 wins in those games compared to 3 for Brian Kelly. I'll tell you that in the last 4 years, Dabo is 3-6 against the SEC and 4-11 against AP top 25 finishers. That's right, 4-11 against AP top 25 finishers the last 4 seasons. From 2015 to 2019, Will, Clemson was 19-3 in those games. 19-3 against AP top 25 finishers. That is what a bona fide juggernaut looks like. Okay.
I'm hitting the smelling salts. I'm getting hype. Okay.
If I'm giving Clemson bulletin board material by pointing these things out, these facts, okay, then they are truly living in their own world, which I won't dismiss that. It's Clemson. They might be living in their own world. LSU is winning this football game. LSU is leaning on that ground game. Finally. And Caden Durham is going to be ready. The Blake Baker defense, it's not going to be perfect against Cade Klubnik, who has had some efficiency issues against the teams that actually matter, but is still an exceptional quarterback. And I came away from that Texas game so impressed with him. But I think that group, that offense, again, too one-dimensional. That backfield's going to have 14 career carries. 14 career carries in this one. And nobody's talking about it. And nobody's talking about the fact that they couldn't run the football at all last year. And they're converting receivers to running backs. And they're doing whatever they can. But it's a Matt Luke coached offensive line. They're going to be just fine. I'll believe it when I see it. Mm-hmm. LSU wins a down-to-the-wire thriller. 31-28. Brian Kelly finally gets LSU a season-opening victory in the 2020s.
All right, for all y'all that want to call me a homer, go ahead, listen up here. As much as I want to believe that, you know what I'm saying? I'm just looking at pictures of Caden Durham's neck right now to get me fired up. I just don't think that LSU can fix their run game with all these transfers on the offensive line after one offseason. I think Caden Durham is the truth. I wish Josh Williams got 0 carries after we saw how good Caden Durham was after basically the South Carolina game. What scares me about this Clemson team is even in the game against Texas, where Texas was pushing them around, very uncharacteristic of these teams. Quick little aside, I rewatched Catholics versus Convicts the other day, and so hard to root for Notre Dame, right? But there was one pretty interesting quote that Holtz had that stuck with me where he said, when a team runs a trick play, they're not good enough to beat you straight up. That's kind of what this feels like when you're talking about the bulletin board material, where it's like, oh, we're getting jazzed up about the truth. And so I get that side of it. But what scares me about Brian Kelly and opening games on the road is that Clemson could play the same game they had against Texas last year and beat LSU, because the strength of LSU's defense, as we know it, okay, again, they have some great transfers, but I'm not going to go and say all this about FSU and just say, but our transfers, they're different. Okay, that was the trash. Okay, we're back. So, anyway, so I'm not going to say LSU's transfers are different. You don't know our transfers. They're different. So point being, on the back end of the defense, I like those guys and they'll gel. But the strength of LSU is their linebackers, Blake Baker, Weeks, Perkins, Patrick Payton, the pass rush, all these guys, right? And so that being said, if Clemson just opts out of running the football and Klubnik throws for 400 yards, I think they'd be perfectly happy with that. Whereas on LSU's side of the ball, I think because of some other issues in pass pro on the road against Clemson's D-line, with a motivated Debo that has been hitting 2 days at church, telling them how sorry they've been and praying for a miracle. I do get a little bit scared that under pressure, Nuss might make a couple of mistakes. Now, that being said, the key to this game is Caden Durham. I think you did hit on that. Not even as a runner, but as a safety valve out of the backfield. I think that is a guy that can prevent some of those mistakes that Nussmeier is known for making in some of these moments. I think that's why Josh Williams got on the field, was because of pass pro. Okay, Josh Williams was a great pass protector. Caden Durham as a freshman didn't exactly have that. I think that if Caden Durham as a blocker and as a receiver can carry his weight, I don't anticipate LSU being built to go down there and run the ball. But I think that's where his role will really shine, not preventing the really costly sack, fumble, turnover, picking a guy up, being that safety valve so Nuss doesn't try to hit a guy downfield and see the wrong tiger. You know what I'm saying? So I think that Clemson wins this game close. I think that it doesn't stop LSU's season. And like I said, I think that we got to commend these teams for playing these games. But I just think in a contest of a little bit of continuity, if LSU was at home, I would feel a little bit differently. But so much is working in Clemson's favor from that standpoint, where it's going to take a lot out of it's going to take a lot out of Nussmeier with kind of the weird offensive coordinator situation they totally didn't get figured out last year. It would take Nussmeier truly putting the team on his back and having like 40 passing attempts and being like, all right, Saints, this is some Drew Brees magic out of me. Like, don't worry about anybody else. The defense could struggle. Anybody could struggle, but it's on me. I think that's what it would take, because I don't really see, the guy that could take the pressure off other than him from this standpoint.
For what it's worth, I could obviously see Brian Kelly getting to the podium maybe not one-handing slamming it. That's a little bit too 2024. Can he do like a headbutt of the table if they lose this time? Or maybe like how, post-game press conference, you've got like recorders and phones and stuff that are on the table. Like just one clean sweep, swipe them all off the table and just offer to pay for everybody's phone afterwards.
But nobody records that. Yeah. I can see it clear as day.
Everybody's phones are just shattered into a million pieces. Could we see something like that happening? Absolutely. Of course I can. I literally witnessed it 2 years ago in that Florida State game here in Orlando. And I was blown away at how despondent LSU looked coming in as a preseason top 5 team and seeing the collapse in the fourth quarter. Like I was well aware of how this has played out every single year. And there is a very realistic possibility that all the things that we outlined are not going to matter. And it will just simply be, oh yeah, it's LSU in a season opening game. Why would you bank on that? Why would you ever assume that? Okay, I'm ready for that to be my takeaway and to have egg on my face. But this assumption that Clemson is just back at 2010s levels is one of the more frustrating things I've endured. And I've tried to bite my tongue on a little bit because I've Clemson going to a semifinal this year. Like, I'm not down on Clemson. Like I think Clemson deserves to start off as like one of the top 5 teams or top 6 teams in college football. So I'm not even going to sit here and be like, oh my gosh, they're not going to win a single meaningful game this year. They will. They have too much talent not to. But to just pretend that they have turned the corner when we saw why they struggled in some of these games last year blows me away. It's a 4-loss team last year.
Yeah.
They lost 4 games last year. And this assumption that they are just at a different level, I'm just not there. Maybe this game will talk me into it, but yeah, Dabo, there you go. There's 15 minutes, 20 minutes of bulletin board material. Just add that to the facts that I pointed out on Sunday.
And to be clear, I agree with you. I think both things can be true. I mean, Clemson can still be a deeply flawed team that gets exposed down the stretch, and they struggle in ACC play even. And who even knows who's in that conference now? They could play Army and lose. I don't know. But played SMU in a conference championship last year. Anyway, so point being, like, all that could be true, right? And they could still struggle against, a team in the semifinal, team in the conference championship level. But what we've seen, we talked about preparers versus adjusters. I expected Brian Kelly to be this big preparer, and that's where I was wrong. And when you look back at Notre Dame, that was where he struggled, right? He's actually a really good adjuster, which is so crazy for a guy like him, where we've seen the same feeling every year. This is why Brian Kelly shouldn't have gotten this job. He's in over his head. He's yelling at his players. Keyshawn Booty's deleting his Instagram. It's gone. And then they just lock in after that. And so I don't know if he overthinks himself. I don't know if he underthinks. I mean, to your point about the running attack last year, I vividly remember being like, not totally sober, now knowing I had COVID-19 in Vegas, being like, dang, John Emery Jr. might be the guy. How about that? So I think that like that was such a funny moment to like look back on, in that like he was fine till he tore his ACL. And so that being said, like I think that enough, like Brian Kelly completely changes after week 1. And so the version of LSU that shows up and the version of Clemson that shows up is going to be different. We might get the best version of Clemson and the worst version of LSU. That's what I'm scared of, but it doesn't make me out on either of these teams.
Let's just say if LSU wins this game, we'll have a little message for Dabo.
Mm-hmm.
We'll have a little message that he can screenshot this message, whatever.
What do you want me to do? Because I've picked against LSU. What do you want me to do if LSU wins this game?
Oh, no. You're fine. Like, you've got enough at stake being a fan that has to watch this team try and get over this hump, this insurmountable hump that it's been so far in the 2020s decade. So I don't want to put you in that position where you have to do anything particular. So we're going to abstain from any sort of, we've already laid out kind of the if LSU doesn't win a national championship, I've got to say something positive. I can't say anything negative about the team that ends their national championship run for the entire offseason. Like we've already kind of laid out the six. So I don't want to put anything additional on you, but let's just say Dabo will have a little bit of a message for him on Sunday if LSU wins. And then also I could have very much egg on my face.